Talvez você já conheça a gente. Ainda não? Bem, nós somos a Novo Nordisk. Nós ressignificamos os rumos na pesquisa sobre obesidade. Não é à toa. Temos mais de 100 anos de pesquisa em saúde em busca de inovações. Controle de peso ainda é um desafio. Mas agora milhões de pessoas no mundo todo podem trilhar um caminho para uma vida mais saudável. Novo Nordisk. Um novo norte contra a obesidade.
Today on CityCast Philly, are you scrambling to find a last-minute gift for that special someone? Or are you trying to figure out what to bring to your next holiday party? Why not put together the ultimate local cheeseboard? After all, Pennsylvania does have the second largest number of dairy farms in the country. So we're revisiting a conversation we had earlier this year with an expert who can point you in the direction of the best local cheeses. It's Monday, December 23rd. I'm Trinae Nuri, and here's what Philly's talking about. Tanaya Darlington, you're the cheese curator at Tria, which is a cheese-centric wine bar with 2 locations in Center City. You're also the author of 2 books, DeBruno Brothers' House of Cheese and Madame Fromage's Adventures in Cheese, and you're a writing professor at St. Joe's University. Is it safe to say that you've tasted just about every cheese in the city?
Oh, that's such a good question. I thought you were going to ask in the United States or in the world. But I would say in the city, well, I've probably come really close. Yes, I would say so.
Okay, what's your favorite local cheese?
Favorite local cheese? I'll have to say it's one of the first cheeses that I was introduced to here in Philadelphia. It's called Birch Run Blue, and it's made by a woman named Sue Miller. She's out in Chester County, and she was the first person who ever invited me into her creamery to watch cheese being made. I also love blue cheese, and I think hers is just on the national level. It's spectacular.
Oh, I like this because I'm also a blue cheese girl, but I like to eat it. I like to eat it with chicken wings. So,
oh, hey, I'm with you. That sounds fantastic.
So you've lived in Wisconsin before, which is known as the cheese capital of the country. What makes Philly a top cheese city?
Here's why I think it's a dairy destination, Trinae. We have, I would say, probably more cheese shops than most major cities in America. And in Philly, we have this, I think, kind of a plethora of cheese shops, plus a lot of surrounding farms that come into the farmers markets and make local cheese available to people here. And I would say the cheesemakers are really active in the city, working with chefs, working with restaurants. And that makes, I think, just this wonderful connection between kind of the city and country. And there's a few other things. There's some really cool people who live here in the cheese world. For example, there's a guy named Mike Gino who paints cheese. He's painted at least one cheese from every state in the United States. And people come in from all over to visit his studio. And there's also a city creamery in the Kensington neighborhood. There's a creamery called Perry Stead Dairy that's been around a few years now. And I think that makes us one of the only cities where you can actually, in an urban environment, see cheese being made and buy cheese that's made right here within the city limits.
Okay, great. What's Philly's signature cheese?
What's our signature cheese? This is so funny you would ask because I've just spent a lot of time in Belgium and France where everyone says, "You're from Philly? Philadelphia cream cheese." So I think we are known as a Philadelphia cream cheese city.
But New York actually invented Philadelphia cream cheese.
I don't know about that. That you might have some deeper intel on that than I do. But the funny thing is that you can get Philly cream cheese now in Europe, and Europeans are very into it. For better or worse, they know that is like our American cheese brand. You also have the cheesesteak here, which is popular with provolone, provolone being an Italian cheese. And I think of Philadelphia being like heavily influenced by Italian cuisine. So in some ways, provolone feels like the city cheese to me.
Now, let's get some of your recommendations for artisan-style cheeses that are local to Philly. If we want to build the ultimate cheese board, what are we going to add?
Well, if you wanted to start with a soft cheese, you could begin with a local labne, which is like a strained yogurt cheese. And that's made by Marion Park Creamery over in Lower Merion. And they call it Lovna. I think that's a really nice way to start. This is a spreadable soft cheese, a little bit tart. It's great on a cheese board for, dipping some crudité or smearing on a cracker. Then I would take you over to the West Philly Farmers Market on a Saturday, where you could meet the team at Valley Milk House. They make beautiful cheeses. All of them are named after weeds. They're located out in Ole Valley. And they make a beautiful cheese called witchgrass that I love.
What does that taste like?
Well, it looks a little bit like a thick cheesecake, almost like a thick brie, but it's covered with this silver rind because it's coated with ash. And so I would say it's in line with like a triple cream. It's really buttery, rich, but it's young, so it's full of moisture. It's wonderful with any sort of berry jam or stone fruit jam. Then we've got some delicious cheddars, like Conabella Farm does some delicious cheddars, so you could do something local there. And then I would definitely pull in Bertrand Hills Farm, who I mentioned. That cheesemaker makes a delicious cheese called Fat Cat. It's a little bit funky, so that would be a nice third cheese. And I'd also follow up with her blue cheese, known as Bertrand Blue. So that's just kind of the tip of what's here. There's certainly other things. If I was going to throw in another cheese, I would add Tree Hug from Perrystead Dairy. That's a gooey, little, very strong, fudgy cheese that is wrapped in bark.
Interesting. Okay. There's more to this cheese conversation after the break.
Oi, aqui é a Natália Souza, do Para Dar Nome às Coisas, e eu tô muito feliz em participar do primeiro amigo secreto de podcasters do TikTok. Eu tirei a Marcela Ceribelli, a Má, do Bom Dia Óbvios, e o meu presente vai ser um livro que eu amo e que bombou muito no TikTok, o Tudo é Rio. A forma com que a Carla Madeira traduz o mundo interno de cada personagem, meu Deus, é arrebatadora.
O TikTok esse ano fez milhões de pessoas voltarem a ler. Um simples TikTok pode gerar um grande impacto. Descubra livros incríveis e muito mais no TikTok.
Sonha em fazer faculdade, mas tem medo de não dar conta? Calma, escuta só o recado da Rebeca Andrade.
Brilha sem medo. A universidade é o seu lugar, sim. E a Estácio tem soluções que provam isso. Acredita, eu também sou aluna.
Viu só? Agora aproveita que os cursos estão a partir de R$ 129 por mês e inscreva-se em estácio.br.
Brilha sem medo. Brilha como a maior do Brasil.
Now, how did you get into the cheese scene in Philly?
I have to credit De Bruner Brothers in the Italian market. I moved to Philadelphia from the state of Wisconsin in 2009, and they were really my first stop. I was homesick for cheese. I went to the counter on like a Tuesday morning and the shop was empty. And I was blown away by how friendly the cheesemongers were and also just how many cheeses were on the counter. It was more cheeses than I'd ever seen before, more than 300. And so I decided to start a blog about it called Madame Fromage to eat my way through the entire shop. So
I love
that's
that.
really how it started. I love a project.
All right, so you ate your way through De Bruner Brothers cheeses. What were some of your standouts from this particular company?
Oh, well, they introduced me to real French Roquefort. I know you love blue cheese as well.
Yeah.
And I'd always grown up on Roquefort crumbles. I'd never had a real French Roquefort, like cut from the wheel. When I tasted that cheese, it had like the flavor of like minerals up front. And then I got this like wonderful flavor of sea salt and even like oysters. But then when you swallowed, there was this interesting vegetal taste, almost like creamed spinach. I'd never sat and really tasted cheese before. And the cheesemongers at De Bruner Brothers literally stood behind the counter and walked me through all these flavors that were unfolding. That was a mind-blowing taste sensation for me. Just so many flavors. And then I learned a little bit from the cheesemongers about the history of Roquefort. It was really, really fascinating. So I became a big fan of that. Taleggio has become one of my favorite cheeses, which is a funky Italian cheese. I kind of think of it as the focaccia of the cheese world. It's just delicious with everything, especially charcuterie. And that's become a real go-to. And I credit De Bruner Brothers for, interesting me in their Italian cheese selection.
That's nice. Other than DeBruno Brothers, where else in the city can I buy or try artisan cheese?
There's Downtown Cheese in Reading Terminal Market. It's in the center of the market. And they have a really lovely selection, and they focus on French cheeses. So if I'm looking for Italian cheese, I might go to DeBruno Brothers. If I'm looking for French cheese, I might stop into Downtown Cheese. Also, I live over in Germantown, the Weaver's Way Co-op. A couple of co-ops have a really great selection of local cheeses and some artisan cheeses. At Tria, where I curate boards, we have a great selection of artisan cheeses. I do a PA playlist board so you can taste local cheeses. I think that's so important to know what your cheeses are locally if you're a cheese lover. Tallulah's Garden, the restaurant on Washington Square, has beautiful boards. There's also a company in West Philly called Third Wheel Cheese, which is a distributor of local cheeses. And they also have a kind of a retail spot inside, so you can pick up cheese there. And then, like I mentioned, the farmers markets, West Philly on Saturday and Head House on Sundays. That's a great place to actually meet cheesemakers and buy directly from them.
Now, there's no secret that inflation has impacted many of us, like we see it in the increased prices at the grocery store. Are there places where we can get affordable cheese?
I think probably the farmers markets are a pretty good way to go. Again, you're buying directly from the maker, so it puts money in their pocket. And I will tell you, nobody goes into cheese making to become a millionaire. So I always advocate for buying directly when possible. Otherwise, places like Weaver's Way Co-op, for example, and I think DeBruno Brothers too, will sometimes do these like very little pieces, like little ends, so that you can buy just a small piece of cheese for a couple of bucks and taste it. Also, just really encourage you to go to a cheese shop where you can taste the cheese in advance. That's one thing I do love about DeBruno Brothers, Downtown Cheese, the farmers markets. You can taste the cheese before you buy. So if you are going to spend, $15 on a cheese, you know how it tastes before you get it home. So I hope that's helpful. I mean, really good cheese is not inexpensive like any other really good product, but I think you can be smart about what you buy and, take a chance on something new by going into a counter where you can taste.
Thanks for those tips. Are there any etiquette for tasting cheese at a cheese shop?
Oh, that's such a good question. Well, if you talk to the cheesemongers, I think what they would tell you, and also cheese makers working at farmers market, they really appreciate it if you're going to come to taste that you are planning to buy and that you're not just there to graze on samples and walk away, right? They spend a lot of time on these products and time, behind a counter. So I think they hope that you'll be a serious cheese lover and also respectful. Also, I think you should know that you can ask any question. And if you are overwhelmed by the selection, ask the cheesemonger for a little advice, or the cheesemaker. Say, I'm new to this, but tonight I'm going to open a dark beer. Which of your cheeses would you recommend? Or, hey, I'm having some friends over. I want to surprise them with something really unusual. What do you have? Or, what did you take home this past week that's like really delicious right now? Feel free to invite some education on the part of the cheesemonger or the cheesemaker. They are there to chat cheese with you. So feel free to engage.
Now, I can't forget about the folks that, cheese may be a little harsh on their stomach. Is there any cheese for those who are lactose intolerant?
I'd say if you're truly lactose intolerant, it might be difficult. If you're lactose sensitive, the thing to remember is to stay away from the fresh cheeses. Anything creamy contains whey, which is the liquid part of cheese, and that contains the lactose. So you'll want to go more towards like your cheddars, your hard cheeses, things like that. In fact, some companies now are advertising their hard cheeses as lactose-free because during the aging process, the lactose breaks down except for like a minuscule amount. You can also try goat cheese or sheep's milk cheese. They tend to be easier to digest for some people than cow's milk cheeses. So those are good places to start.
I want to go back to that question of what is Philly's signature cheese? And you mentioned the Italian cheese, provolone. We've talked about so many cheeses, where you can buy them in the city, the etiquette, all of that. What about Cheese Whiz? This is the cheese product that comes from the can that people order on cheese sticks. What's your opinion on Cheese Whiz?
I mean, I think there's a cheese for every situation, right? I'm not sure there's any cheese in Cheese Whiz. As you even said, it's a cheese product. There might be some like powdered cheese in there or something like that. I mean, each person to their own. But if I'm eating a cheesesteak, usually I want like the most delicious mushroom brie under it, or at the very least, I want, provolone peppers.
Okay, that I've got to try. Tanaya Darlington, cheese curator at Tria, thank you so much for all of these recommendations and for joining me on CityCast Philly.
Thank you so much, Trinae.
Check out all the places we talked about in this episode by clicking the links in our show notes. That's all for today here on CityCast Philly. If you enjoyed this episode about all things cheese, tell a friend. Also, rate the show, leave us a review, and hit that subscribe button. Be sure to sign up for our morning newsletter, Hey Philly, to learn about what else Philly's talking about. We're going to take some time off for the holidays over the next week, but in the meantime, we'll be sharing some of our favorite episodes from this year. So stay tuned and happy holidays. Bye.